Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 135 of the podcast. Today we're talking to Andrew Johnston about leaving traditional publishing for independent publishing. We go into the story of why, with his debut novel, he decided to take a different direction, get his rights back, recover and redo all of his publishing. We talk about the difficulties around that and also the empowerment of that decision. So I think you want to stick around for that conversation. It's very interesting, and Andrew is a very positive guy. He talks a lot about disability representation as well, autism representation, because he himself is autistic and he's very comfortable with that and wants to show that to the world through his writing. So I think you'll really enjoy that part of the conversation. So, in terms of updates this last week, so the biggest life update for me was that I started a new full-time job. So, unexpectedly during paternity leave, not too long, a few weeks ago, a job opportunity came out of nowhere and it seemed too good to let up. So, I ended up accepting the offer and, like I said, started last week. It's been a wild ride. Definitely, it's one of those changes that even though I've done it multiple times in my life, you can never prepare for exactly what the company is that you're going to. So, just learning the ropes, trying to figure out how everything runs. Still work from home, which is a huge blessing. I appreciate being able to stick it out at home. And I think it helps with not having the commute when we're helping or when I'm doing the animal chores and in the morning and the afternoon. But yeah, it's a change that I didn't expect. So in the midst of everything, I'm impressed that I've been able to keep writing, keep making progress on my books. We'll get into all the author updates here in just a moment. But in other homestead news, I believe last week I talked about moving the egg layers from out in the pasture back in to their normal location. So, or maybe I didn't talk about, I can't remember the exact timing of when we did that, but gathered all of the some 50 some odd chickens, put them back in their normal run, which has grown up with lots of weeds. It's good though. They like to eat all of those weeds. So it just provides some extra food for them. We didn't cut them down because we figured the chickens would just peck at them, peck at them. Um, but moving chickens is not my favorite thing. I'll tell you that much because catching chickens is a pain. And no matter how hard you try, chickens aren't going to become friendly. Some do. A couple of them are okay. So you usually have to wait until they're roosting at night. Um, we managed to do it during the heat of the day actually because they escape the heat of the day by going back into their temporary houses to get in the shade. So I just trapped them back in there, and then I just had to get in, kind of crouch down and get them and put them in a cage to drag them, like a quarter of a mile out in the pasture, back and forth to put them back in the house. So, part of the reason we did that was because the houses needed to be used for the meat chickens. So, the meat chickens are a little more than 2 weeks now. They will grow to 8 weeks max, and then that's when we'll process them. So, that's 6 weeks away. And they were just getting too big. The temporary house that they had inside the shop, kind of the brooding place, where you've got the light and they grow, they need all the heat to grow. We don't really need that anymore because they got too big for the space. So I had to take them out of that and put them into the pasture, which once again, moving chickens is not my favorite, but I did a whole lot of it last week. But they're happy, they're out there just thriving, pecking the ground, trying to figure out what it's like to be a chicken that's pasturing. The idea is they'll be able to gain more weight and hopefully be more quality meat for us if they eat all of that stuff out there. So at least that's the plan. Let's see, other than that, it was chicken week this last week. Nothing else for the kids. I think I mentioned this before. My daughter's just started ballet class. And it's interesting when you have 7 children, extracurriculars provide a very interesting type of logistical stress for the family. Granted, my wife bears the brunt of it for the most part because she's running kids back and forth. I work from home, so she will leave kids with me and I'll go upstairs and work next to them, sit at the table, or just keep my door open and listen for fighting. But there's just the logistical. It's crazy. Our kids started piano lessons as well. We have another set of activities. Archery is going to start up here in the next month. And the more kids you have, even if each one only has one extracurricular activity, you can imagine doctor's appointments and dentists and all these different activities every week. Most of them are weekly. Um, there's just a lot going on. So just trying to wrap our minds around all the logistics of all the kids doing fun things outside of the home. We want to make sure they can do it. But my wife is also very ambitious. So making cheese and butter and breads from scratch and doing all these things just takes up a lot of time. So I'm pretty sure her life is more busy than mine. I work full time, which is necessary to fund everything, but she's running around like crazy. So ultimately, someday, if I can spur the business of my author business and I can work full time, hopefully I can alleviate some of that from her. If I don't have to sit in chair for 40 hours a week or more, then I might be able to help out with that. That's the dream. That's the goal. So really thinking about, I'm going to shift over to author updates now, how I can optimize my author business. And I've talked about this before, going more direct, setting everything up on a direct website. All of that is done. I have it all put in place. I'm working on getting Dragon Blooded up there. So Dragon Blooded has been done. Finished the manuscript, finished um, the line edits and then the copy edits. The manuscript is even formatted and uploaded for pre-order. I do intend on putting it up early, so it should be available by the end of this week. If you're part of my email list, then you'll see that. I'll send an email saying Dragon Blooded is available for you early in ebook format as well as in paperback. So you can buy that directly from me before it goes live on Amazon and all the other retailers on September 24th. So I'm going to give people the opportunity to buy directly from me. I know it's only 2 weeks early. I'm trying to give this a test before I put it into my practice of maybe even doing it a month or two earlier before I put it on these other shops. So this is just kind of a trial to see what happens. But really focusing on my email list, focusing on my audience, as opposed to using Amazon. I'll always have my books on Amazon, but I want to focus on direct first. I think it provides an opportunity for people to support me, and of course, you can make more money. You get more per book, even if the cost is less on the website. So you do have to pay for shipping. That's the one thing that some people may or may not love. If you have Amazon Prime, then by all means, buy it on Amazon. Um, but yeah, I was really struck by an interview that Joanna Penn had last week. So the date would have been September 1st or September 2nd, I believe. And where she was talking to an author who made the decision to sell direct, but he does a lot more with his intellectual property. Uh, he has this letter. If you want to listen to it, that's great. Like I said, it's the episode on September 2nd, 2024. He has this letter campaign where you can sign up and he'll send you horror story letters, like this long story over the course of a year. And with it, you get some book boxes and you get other little bits and bobs, and people love it. And he learned that his audience is more responsive to direct communication. And so he's built this awesome business away from Amazon, away from these other retailers. And he loves it. And he said he'll always have his books up there, but he's looking for people that are wanting to work with him directly. And so he doesn't encourage people to buy it on these other retailers. And I thought that was an interesting perspective to have. I think not that there's anything wrong with Amazon, but he made the point that if you have a business that you're trying to evaluate for whatever reason, they're going to look at you if everything is in KDP or in Amazon or in Kobo or Google or all these other places, and they're going to say, well, how many audience members do you have? How many customers do you have? And he said, you don't know. There's Amazon doesn't give you that information, and they never will. You don't know who buys your books. And so if you were to evaluate that, they would look at you and say, well, that's not your business. That's Amazon's business. And so he's building his business in that way. Now, do I think that I'll be able to do that as quickly as him? Probably not. But, it made me reflect more on where I want to be as an author. And so I've decided that I want to commit, let's say commit in this case, to publishing a book every 6 months. So it's definitely possible with how I write. It's the editing process that stops me up. So I'm putting in plans to reverse You can laugh at me. I'm proud of myself. I'm so proud of myself. Reverse outline my life, book publishing schedule, so that I can know when I need to start certain things. When do I need to start the next book? When I need to have the cover made for the next book? When do I need to have the edits completed so that I can publish every 6 months? So, it's definitely different for me to plan something like that, to reverse plan deadlines. I've talked before about how deadlines don't work for me, and historically I haven't, but times and seasons, things change. You would develop, you change. So here I am making schedules for myself to publish a book every 6 months. And I think that comes from the decision, the drive to get to 20 books as soon as possible. Right now, if I include the three Cyber City books, which I didn't technically self-publish, that's 8 books, almost nine. If I don't include them, then I'm back down to six. So we're looking at anywhere from 10 to 14 books that I need more to reach that 20. And looking at one book every year, maybe one every other year, I'm going to be quite a bit older before I can hit that 20. And so, I decided, let's just do it. I think consistency also helps you build an audience better because people know when to expect books to come from you. So we're going to give it a go. Worst case, I publish books a little bit more quickly, but I think I'll be able to do it twice a year. I don't think that's impossible. So anyway, that's the shift, the change in my author business. So looking back at what I'm actually writing, I am about 70,000 words into Dwarf Blooded. That's moving very quickly. Um, I'm back editing the short story that I'll be submitting to Writers of the Future. It remains to be seen if I'll keep doing Writers of the Future with my new 2 book a year plan. We'll see. Definitely want to focus on the books that matter. No offense to Writers of the Future, but I mean, I'm gonna be publishing books regardless of whether I win that competition. So it's less important than writing books and getting them out there for people. Um, but Dragon Blooded, like I said, is done. Will be out on September 24th. I'm still sending out ARC. So if you haven't gotten an ARC copy of it and you want one, definitely let me know. You can email me at dan@dankenner.com or dan at the casual author and at the casualauthor.com. Doesn't matter. They'll both get to me and let me know. Um, and I'll send you a copy of it up front. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing the reviews come in for that. I'm grateful for people who are willing to read that. As you know, if you like the show, if you like to support the show, I appreciate your support. I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/the casual author. Just for a couple dollars a month, you can support the show. Obviously, I do this for free. I do this for you. So any sponsoring is very greatly appreciated, but not necessary. So just if you're willing and love the show, definitely another thing you can do is share, add reviews to the show, rate it on the application that you're using. And yeah, if we can get more listeners, I would very, very much appreciate that. And yeah, just looking forward to make a difference in positivity, bringing more positive view perspective on authoring, because I suspect that most people in this world are very, very busy. So let's come together and talk about how we, as busy people, can still be authors. But I believe that's all of the news for today. There's a lot of different things, so we can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with Andrew Johnston. Hey, Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing very, very well. It's cool to have another repeat person on this podcast. I have had a couple people that have come back, but we had a conversation a number of months ago about your debut novel, and you're back
Mhm.
again with another novel, but you've decided to take a different route with it. Is that correct?
That's correct. I decided to switch to the indie route. And so far it's been very educational and I've absorbed a lot and I've had fun with it and everything. All it takes is a little bit of patience and things work out.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the decisioning around leaving your publisher because that's a pretty big decision. Well, what's the story with that decision?
Well, I left the publisher because they were doing a lot of things that I didn't really agree with. They were giving only about 2 weeks a week to 2 weeks for ARC readers to actually read the book, and you're not paying the ARC readers, so you can't really force them to get it all done in that amount of time. So I didn't care for that. And then there's stuff involving to where they were dragging their feet on like the cover and so on. And just getting that first book out that we did an interview for was quite a struggle because things weren't quite the way I liked them, and there was a lot of excuses made. And I just said to myself, you know what, I'm going to go indie, see how far it goes, and I can always try and switch back with a lot of hope and a lot of patience and go from there. But no, indie going the indie route's been interesting, and it's much more to my pace and everything. So
So in
yeah.
your case, it's a faster pace, right?
Oh yeah, it's a faster pace and everything, which is pretty good and so forth. Like I can understand why it takes the amount of time it does for traditional and so forth, because it's a different ball game. But with indie and stuff, as long as you have things set up a certain way, you can pump them out. Like right now, I could probably start pumping out the first three books to my Iron Frost universe series, but I want to spread it out just to be responsible financially. Because right now I put a good bit of money into just a novella, and I don't want to go and you know go off the rails and everything. When I say off the rails, I mean like spending a lot of money in an extremely short period of time. It just doesn't feel responsible. So I'm taking it easy.
Yep, absolutely. I totally understand. It's surprising before you get into indie publishing, you don't really think that much about the cost of it until you get into it and realize, oh, there's just a lot of things that add up and add up and add up. So yeah, I
Hmm.
understand the spacing it out, but I think it's really cool that you've taken initiative and you've said to your publisher, "Hey, look, you're not moving fast enough for me. I want to move a little faster." Did you have any trouble getting those rights back, or were they pretty okay with it?
Well, they it wasn't so much that they weren't doing things fast enough. It's more along the lines they just weren't doing things properly.
Sure, fair
And that
enough.
was my experience and everything like that. Like I have the patience to do things at a slow pace and so forth, but it was just an amalgamation of combination of uh, uh, drama and everything like that. I just wanted it out of it. Now, as far as getting the rights back is concerned, that was um, relatively easy and so forth. But it did cost me quite a bit, and but it's worth it and all that. And I'm just waiting patiently for the book to come off of the internet and everything. And the book was called Prim Noir. I'm actually going to probably rename it depending upon circumstances.
Are you gonna recover it as well? And well, I guess you
Yeah,
rename it, you have to recover it, yeah.
recover it, rename it, and everything because and not to go too deep into personal business, but it takes a while for it to be taken off the internet, from what I'm told, and I'm just hoping that that happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine that. I've heard of other people who have gotten their rights back, and yeah, I think some of them still have the listings up years later. So hopefully, in your case, it doesn't take that amount of time, but it's hard to say for sure. Just kind of depends on the process and everything. But I'm glad that it was a relatively easy, albeit expensive, experience because I have heard of some challenges for some authors where sometimes it can take years to get that back, or they have to wait till the publisher fails, or there's other circumstances of it.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's really exciting. So you have a prequel. Is it a novel or a novella coming out in
It's a
October?
novella, and it's actually it's separate from the um, actual Iron Frost universe and everything. It's its own world and everything, and it starts
Nice.
out in Victorian era England, and it goes into another dimension that is made up of mountains in different countries and so forth. And this is all created because there's all these fathers who are ashamed of their children and they want to hide them from the world. And the only
Hmm.
way for them to free themselves from that dimension is to joust their way out. So it's kind of like a Victorian era medieval time travel sort of thing. And it also covers like, bullying and so forth. And as I had mentioned for my other book, autistic representation and everything is present in it. And overall, I'm very proud of it. It actually almost got an agent years ago and so forth, but you know, I kept it until now and I wanted to release it.
Well, I mean, it's great that there's a little bit of validation in that you had an agent interested in it. So now you can go with full confidence knowing that there's going to be an audience, there's going to be readers that will hopefully be attracted to the story. But I'm always fascinated. I love that you do autistic representation. Obviously, have a very close firsthand experience with autism. Do you find that it's I guess, a relaxing or a cathartic experience to represent that in your books?
Yeah, I find it very good. I'm glad to explore it and use my own personal experiences and everything. I had to rely heavily on sensory um, overload and information more than anything else because the intellectual part of it is a little bit hard to explain because
Yeah.
um, I myself am not great with sarcasm, but trying to put that into a book for me is very difficult. So I was stuck with sticking to a certain subject while the conversation continues. I stuck with, certain sounds and everything like that, bothering someone. With this, it was more back then I actually was able to latch on to the intellectual part of it more than anything else. But my later works have been more on the sound and environment sort of thing and so forth. Quite an evolution.
Very cool. So I'm curious to know, do you have like a beta reader or an alpha reader or anybody that reads to just check the sarcasm or other things that you put in your book that you might not be as aware of, or do you just rely on ARC readers for that?
Well, for this in particular, it was done so long ago
Yeah, fair
that
enough.
all the arc reading was done. It was like 2018
Oh, fair enough.
when I had it when I had it beta read and alpha read and so forth and professionally edited. So all that was needed for the discard night was done. I had just let
Nice.
it sit for a while until I found the opportunity to put it out there. Now, will I rely on beta readers and so forth in the future? Um, most definitely. At this point right now, I'm just searching for ARC readers for the discard night and so forth. There's a sign up on my website, authorandrewjohnston.com, and I'm trying to get as many as I can on there before the release of the book on October 3rd.
Nice. Yeah, so you're a little bit ahead of the game, which is perfect. Although that's gonna come fast. It's
Oh
crazy
yeah,
how fast time goes.
oh
So
for sure. But thankfully, though, the novella is less than 200 pages. It's about 143 pages. So
that's not too bad. Yeah.
yeah, so that'll be a quick read for anyone.
So which inspiration came first? Because I know you said that this was already in about 2018. Did you get the inspiration for the Iron Frost series before the Discarded Knight, or was the Discarded Knight long before the Iron Frost?
Well, this Iron Frost universe actually started before the Discard Knight, but then I decided, okay, I'm gonna see how well I can push everything into a very small package.
Sure.
So then I wrote the Discard Knight, and then I continued on with the Iron Frost universe and everything, trying to query the first two books and so on. And then I made it to the publisher, left the publisher, and now the Iron Frost universe is nearly complete as far as written ones. There's one more book in that universe that needs written. Um, but that, like I said, will be sent out later. But yeah, as far as this card tonight is concerned, that came off the inspiration of looking at my life at that point
Mm.
and all the things that I experienced up until then. For instance, from working for the family business to also not understanding sarcasm, to bullying, to feeling separate from the world because of how I function and everything. So I put all that into that, and I also put in like other you know things that make people different, disabilities and so forth into it. And there's actually, if you go on my blog, there is two prequel stories. One that actually needs finished, and another one that is finished. And the one that is finished is called A Cold, Cold Future, and that is the origin story for the villain of the Discard Knight.
Oh. Interesting. Very, very cool. There's just so many. That's the greatest thing I think about writing in general is just the freedom to just take you wherever you want, write various side stories that connect into it. And then as an independent publisher, you also have the rights to do whatever the heck you want with it, which
Oh
is
yeah.
so great. It's nice to say the power is in your
Hmm.
hands to do what you want with those stories, which is so cool. It
Hmm.
sounds like you write very, very quickly. So I'm curious to know, what does your writing process look like?
Well, now actually that I'm back on my usual writing schedule, I usually try to write uh 5 times a week, and I try to churn out at least 500 to 800 words a day
Yeah.
and so forth to, make progress and everything. It's right now I'm in a bit of a limbo because I've got 3 books that are just need a little bit of adjustments and covers and all that, and then I have the Scarnet that I'm promoting, and then I have another one that I started, which is about 10,000 words in, and then I actually started another book which is separate from everything else and so forth. So I've got a lot of
Yeah.
irons in the fire and everything, which I'm actually thinking I might need to uh, focus on 2 things or 3 things instead of 5 or 6 things, because as an indie author, you will be pulled in many different directions and so forth. Now, the same thing can count for traditional publishing, but you have a team to do all the stuff versus
Right.
being on your own, unless you're willing to spend a little bit of money, or if you have a certain situation in your life that allows things.
But yeah, there's just so many pieces. And so if you consider each project has multiple pieces in and of itself, so each project is not just the project itself, but it's all the extra things on top of that project. So I understand. I was laughing a little bit when you said you're also writing another book because I'm the same way. I can't seem to focus on 1 to 2 stories at a time because I have these ideas and I get excited about something. And that works for some people to be able to work on multiple things, and it doesn't work for other people. It just depends on you. Um, but I think it's great that you've got plans,
Mhm.
going out into the future about what you want to do. I mean, you've indicated hoping to publish about once every 6 months, if possible, with these stories. And from what I understand, you don't write short books, right? Your books aren't
They're
short.
not sure. They get to between 90 and 100,000 words.
Yeah.
I am, however, getting better at short stories. I wrote a 3-part short story that is in what's called Altered Reality magazine, which is an online
Oh.
magazine. So, and it's called Frostily, and it's actually takes place inside the Iron Frost universe and is more about a character that we only see a small bit of in book 2 of the Iron Frost universe and everything. But I'm also, as it reminds me, I'm also working on another separate story that's separate from everything else and all that. It's a resurrection of an old story
Hmm.
that involves like creation myth and everything. So yeah, that's one more to add to the pile and everything. But yeah, I've got myself spread out pretty thin and everything like that. And I both like it, and I both am like I need a vacation. So
Yeah. I think that's a hard thing. Sometimes we forget we do need vacations, even as authors. It's similar to
mm.
full-time jobs or even part-time jobs or whatever. Sometimes you just need a little bit of a break. But I'm curious to know, because of all the things that you have going on, now that you have your rights back and you're going down this independent route, how do you know how to prioritize what's most important?
Well, I mean, I just look at what's done and what's not done.
Mhm.
Essentially, I mean, the discard night. I mean, it's essentially done. All it really needs is for me to, talk to other authors, talk to readers and stuff like that, and to post about it. I post regularly once a week and everything, and promote once a week and all that, and I put out things, and that seems to create a good routine as far as the novella is concerned. Now, in regards to all the other projects that are going on, I look at what is closest to being either finished or at least has the most progress, and I focus on that. Now, saying that, the Iron Frost Universe series actually is closer to being finished. That's why I think I might actually have to take the new book and set it aside, because got to get that 4th book written and everything. So yeah, now this meeting has reprioritized things for me. I'm like,
Well, it wasn't
yeah,
intentional, but
Andrew, you need to kind of like chop it down and everything. So yeah, now I got a mission now. I've got it all in my head. But yeah, it's all in what has the most progress done.
Hmm.
I don't like to leave anything half done or just sitting. So I will be pushing to finish the Iron Frost universe series first, as far as the story is concerned, and then worry about putting things out as I go along, and then I'll go back to the other new story that I started recently. So yeah, it's just a matter of what's um, done the most, what has the
Hmm.
most words, what has the most
Progress.
development.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, and maybe this isn't part of your plans, but you mentioned the Iron Frost universe. The Discarded Knight is not technically a part of that. Is it tangentially related? Is this like a multiverse type situation, or are they just completely separate situations?
It's a completely separate thing because it exists in both the real world and also another dimension
All right, like a
and so
portal
forth.
type
So
situation,
it's
right?
its own thing. Have thought of a way to tie it into the Iron Frost universe, but then I haven't actually developed time travel in
Uh,
the Iron Frost universe, and time travel exists in the world of the Discarded Knight. Um, so it's separate. To answer your question, yeah, it's all
yeah.
separate and everything.
No, the only reason I ask is because I know, so I haven't really looked at doing a combination of universes in my stories too much, but I know that there's some indie authors that have created like their own multiverse. They're independent authors. And so most or all of the books they write are tangentially related to each other in almost this kind of Brandon Sanderson, Cosmere multiverse
Mhm,
type situation. And so all of their branding, their website, and the books they write and the emails they
mhm,
send are all around this universe, which I think is fascinating. It's an interesting
mhm.
way to take a look at it, but I've never considered doing something like that. So just kind of an
Yeah.
interesting perspective. So when you're done with the fourth book with Iron Frost and you might potentially jump into this new one, do you think that will be the end of the Iron Frost universe, or is that just kind of the beginning of it?
I think it will be the end as far as novels are concerned. As far as
Sure.
short stories are concerned, um, not so much. As long as I'm able to put them out, put short stories out on my blog, and hopefully it with the magazine and so forth. I will try to keep on doing some short stories here and there and so forth. But I wanted to just like do a four book series and then start concentrating on standalones and so forth because they're, in my opinion, they're more productive and you also don't have to make as many notes and so forth because I've got notes everywhere and I don't even know if half of them are true or not because I probably have already changed them in my head by the time I actually read the note and so
Yeah,
forth.
I get that. I haven't, so I am not great at taking notes. You're better than me. At least you take notes. Most of the time, I assume that's where I'll be if I take notes. So I tell myself, I better just try to remember it. And I figure if I forget it, then it's not meant to be in the book. If I remember it, then it's meant to be in the book. But yeah, usually what I land on is having one single spreadsheet for a series of books, and that's all I use. And sometimes there's a lot of notes, and sometimes there's nothing. Just kind of depends on what I want to put in there. But do you find that you prefer notes physically outside, like, or digitally? What works best for you for keeping notes?
Notes outside because then I don't have to like switch back and forth and minimize and
Oh, sure.
everything. I can just
Yeah.
look at it on paper or in the notebook and go from there because I just have the laptop. I don't have like two big screens like some people have desktop with two big screens. I just have the laptop itself and everything. So
Yeah.
and plus I try to be a little bit old fashioned and a little bit new fashioned at the same time, be digital and be paper at the same time.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's something to be said about the tactile, experience of writing. I personally haven't felt the benefits of it, but one thing I haven't really tried that much. I was laughing a little bit
Mhm.
about the multiple screens because I don't think that's actually a good thing. I think having just one laptop might be more advantageous, particularly for someone like myself who has ADHD. I'm very easily distracted. So having the multiple screens sometimes is a detriment to my focus. I have to like
Mhm.
empty all the screens anyway. I work from home, so that's why I've got
Mhm.
like a bunch of different screens. So
Mhm.
I think you might be lucky that you just have the one
Mhm.
laptop. It probably works very well for staying focused for the most part.
Oh, Oh, for sure. And if I just don't think I could do two screens and all that because it would just be distracting. I mean, and
Hmm.
so on because you're like looking at this and then you have to match it up to this, but then you're like, well, what if you scroll too far ahead here? And just
Hmm.
keep it simple, you know.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. But so, yeah, I know there's a lot of people who prefer like sticky notes and they put sticky notes all on their walls for remembering plot points and characters. So, how do you keep those sticky notes, or I guess maybe they're not sticky notes. How do you keep those notes organized in a way where you don't get too confused when you look at those?
Well, what I do basically is I take a notebook, I write out the kind of beginnings and so forth, what I want and everything, and then I'll keep that for a while, and then as everything evolves, I'll probably throw away that paper and have what's on that paper a little bit on the next thing, and just it just keeps evolving from there. And what I'm trying to do is to focus an entire story into one notebook versus having all this other stuff. Because at one point I had one for continuity, I had one for magic systems, and I had one for this and one for that. And I actually got to a point where, at least with the Iron Frost universe, to where I have a whole file on the magic system and the cities and so forth and everything. So that's all there, and that doesn't change. You don't. I just add things onto it. Now, since I'm gonna go back to the Iron Frost universe and focus on that last book and everything, I'm gonna have one notebook for that. And then if there's new magic system and new names and stuff like that, I'll just tack it onto that file and so on. I mean, I usually use just paper and all that, but what I figure is if I can have a master source for all the magic systems all and everything involving the cities and so forth, then that'll be great. And I can just print it out whenever if I need to.
Yeah, well, I think understanding your process is what's most important. If it works for you, then that's great. A
Mhm.
combination of digital and physical notes. But I think the one thing that I'm sure you've learned this about independent publishing is giving yourself some grace as you're figuring everything out, because there are a lot of steps to independent publishing, and just trying to be patient, and mistakes might happen. If they happen, you learn from them and you move forward with it. But do you have any pieces of advice for someone who maybe they are considering leaving traditionally publishing and going to independent publishing? Do you have any advice for them? They're looking into that.
My advice is that make sure you know what you want. Make
Mm,
sure everything that is typed out is exactly what you plan on putting into, if you use Draft Digital, if you use Amazon, if you use any other form of a platform that helps you create, um, you know, print on demand copies of your book, because you will cause yourself more stress in the future if you go and you get a proof copy and you find issues, which is what you're supposed to look for issues in a proof copy, but you'll cause yourself more grief if you don't have everything you want in there. Now, will you make
mm,
mistakes? Absolutely. That's what proof copies are for. But just know that if you take your time and you give yourself enough time and, of course, grace to put out the book, you'll put out a better product. For example, with the note at the discard night, I got my proof copy and decided, and it looked great. It looked great. It didn't look like there was anything wrong. But then I decided to read through it, and I'm like, uh oh. So I went and I re-uploaded certain things and did this and did that, and now everything's better. So now, what comes out for from pre-orders on the day of the release will be better and all that. But my advice basically is to make sure you know what you want as far as cover, as far as editing, as far as the story is concerned. And what's most important is the story because it won't matter what your cover looks like. It won't matter if you have the correct ISBN or anything like that. If the story is totally messed up, those things are important, but those come later because that's just the outer wrapping. That's what helps you sell the book. So make sure that story is exactly what you want. Now, you want to be a perfectionist? No, don't be a perfectionist because eventually you have to release the book. I knew a guy who took 5 years to finish his book. Now, sometimes it takes a long time to finish a book, but it took 5 years, and it's like even after those 5 years, he's still didn't feel it was ready, you know.
Yeah, well, so
So
there's a lot to unpack there because I love what you said about know what you want. It's a little bit more challenging for someone like myself who's a pantser. I discovery
mhm.
write everything that I write, and so a lot of the times I don't know what I want because I don't know what the story is until I write it. But post story writing, I can develop it and edit it and make it into something that I want it to be. But no, I like what you said. I think there is a tendency in publishing, particularly independent publishing, to overdo it when it comes to revising and editing. Obviously, you need to do it, and you need to do it a lot. But I have a friend who also, I think she took 9 or 10 years to write her book, and I've read her book and it's very good. I will say it's a very good book. But I don't know that the extra, 7, 8 years of time editing it changed it all that much. I mean, I didn't read
Mhm.
the earlier versions, but at the end of the day, at some point, you just have to be like, yeah, this is as good as it's going to be. I'm ready to write for it. I'm ready to move on for something else. So I definitely can't imagine editing a book for 10 years.
Yeah,
That
me either. I can do that.
sounds a lot. That's a very long time.
I don't have the patience for that. Like
Neither do I.
at all. Now, sometimes books that you feel are finished, a few years later, you find something that might
Well,
be
sure.
wrong,
Yeah.
but that's bound to happen in everything. Heck, I know people that they put their book out there, the uni publish and everything, and the moment someone finds an issue in their book, they automatically re-upload a new version, and I'm like, why are you giving yourself all that extra work?
Hmm.
If someone finds something, they find something and all that. You were happy initially. Just allow people to discover.
Honestly, you're the first person I've talked to that believes that. I think the same thing, Every once in a while, this hasn't happened a lot recently, but I remember a book that I published probably 5 years ago. And actually, not 5 years, probably 3 years ago now. Someone messaged me, was like, "Oh, did you know that there's this typo in this book?" And I was like, "I don't care."
Yeah.
It's like a double space, or like it's one word that has an extra letter. And I was like, it's unfortunate, but the amount of time it
Mhm.
takes to update that is just silly. I'm like, I can't keep spending so much time uploading new files. I'm fine with it. But
Yeah.
personally, that's the way I read. I read tons of books. I've read so many mistakes and I just don't care. I'm like, not a big deal. I know what it takes to go into
Right.
publishing. I'm not going to hold that slight mistake against the author. Now, if it's something
Mhm.
major that's distracting and pulls me out of the story, then it gets a little annoying. Or if it's very frequent,
Mhm.
meaning they're making the same mistake over and over again, it's just like, all right, I
Mhm.
think you just did it wrong. But if there's a couple things in there, who cares? I'm there for the
Yeah.
story. It doesn't bother me. But anyway, I appreciate that you
Yeah.
said that.
Exactly. Well, I used to hold it against myself, not other authors, because that's out of my control. It's out of your control what happens with other authors' books, but with our own, we're like, oh my gosh, this is here. How many people are seeing this and making comments? Like the one of the things that freaked me out was with Amazon, to where if someone, that the policy still exists, that if someone finds one issue with your book that they buy, they can return it. And I'm like, they got me paranoid. I was like, oh my gosh, if I have a comment out of place, if the cover looks kind of funky,
Oh, yeah.
uh, what do I do? You know,
Well, I think
so
can versus will is a much different story. I haven't a lot. I don't think I've had any people return my books. If they did,
mhm.
it's up to them. They're welcome to.
Right,
But yeah, I haven't had any
absolutely,
issues with that.
absolutely. And I honestly think that people are going to enjoy the Discarded Night because you start out with the main character being 5 years old, and then next chapter he pops up into being a teen, and it's a lot about finding his courage and so forth. And it leads to him doing things that he never expected he'd be able to do because of what he experienced in the past. For instance, he's afraid of heights.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
kind of a spoiler alert, he kind of conquers that. But there's a lot of conquering this and conquering that as far as emotionally and intellectually and so forth in this book. And I think people were, and there's also there actually is some pop culture references
Okay.
in this. And so if I refer to a few things that, I mean, comic book lovers would be like, oh my gosh, he referred to that. That's from like 1987 and so on. It's like,
That's funny.
why is he using a 1987 comic book reference? I'm like, because I can,
Because why
because it's
not?
there.
Yeah. Because
Exactly.
man, that is the power. Definitely. Well, I think it's cool. I love to hear your experience. I'm so glad to hear that you're taking this route. Honestly, it sounds like based on the plan you have that you're going to enjoy it. I mean, there's
Mhm.
always going to be some difficulties with independent publishing, but definitely it seems like you're the type of person that needs to have that control in the timing of the process, what it looks like, the etiquette or whatever it is around the publishing. So hopefully you find that it's a great experience. And I'm looking forward to your book, The Scarlet Knight. I've already pre-ordered it. So I'm
Cool.
looking forward to reading that. Hopefully
Well,
everybody else is as well. And it sounds like as far as the age of the story, because I have some children that love to read. My 10-year-old will read pretty much anything.
mhm.
Is that the type of book that he would enjoy as well?
Yeah, I think you will. It's well, I mean the main character, he's 17 years old. So, I mean, it's relatable up to a certain extent. You deal with the anxieties of bullying in school and so forth. And granted, this is set in an older time, so what was bullying back then isn't quite the same now, but not everything changes. People
Mhm.
still will uh, mess with your uniform if you're in private school. People will still call you names and everything like that, but it's relatable on that front. And I think your son and many others in the sphere of teenagers will enjoy the action, will enjoy the characters. um they'll see a lot of things that are hopefully very relatable. And I do have an international cast. Like, I do feature characters from across the globe and so forth. And like I said, they're all fighting to be free of this other dimension.
Very
You know.
cool. I think that's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it. And the link will be in the show notes for people listening. If you want to pre-order The Discarded Knight, or if you're listening to this after October, since these episodes are there forever, then you could
Mhm.
probably buy it if it's after October 2024. But yeah, take advantage of the link and go grab that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anywhere else people can find more information about you and your books?
Well, there you can go to www.authorandrewjohnston.com, and that's my website, and that has a little bit about me in it. And there's a link for purchasing the ebook version, the paper, and actually the paperback. You just go to Barnes and Noble to
Hmm.
get the paperback. That's where the paperback's available. And you can also go on Amazon and look up the book and get it there as well. Um, as far as any other places you can find me at www.hwjohnston.blogspot.com, and that right there will contain that kind of prequel story, origin story of the villain um, in the Discard Knight, and also the beginnings of another short story is connected with that. And I actually really at some point would like to write more into that universe, short story wise, not so much novel wise and everything.
Well, I mean, who
But
knows? You
yeah,
may start with short
yeah, who
stories
knows?
and
That's true.
back into writing novels. You
Exactly.
never know.
I would though, and if I did do anything that's going to go along with the novella, it would probably be more within the world, within that other dimension that exists in the book than in the Victorian era or any other place and so forth, because a lot of that world needs explored. The mountains that represent each country and so forth, how the landscape is separated, and so on.
Very cool. Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing
Absolutely.
conversation.
Absolutely.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview. Andrew is such a very practical, level-headed, smart person. I really enjoy conversations with him. His world is also absolutely fascinating. His books are really high on the list of my read list because just the concept of them is fantastic. It's one of those things where I need to actually work through my reading list. But next week, another interesting, it's almost like a flip-flop decision. So I'm talking to LG Nixon about making very difficult decisions. So she changed her publisher as well from a more self-published, self-led to a little more guided, almost traditional. It isn't exactly traditional publishing as much as like a small indie press, but she talks about the reasoning behind that, the support that she received as a result of that, and how it was perfect for her life. So I think you'll enjoy that conversation. It's kind of ironic that week after week, there's a little flip-flop in people's decisions. So she talks about how that is a difficult decision or was a difficult decision, but it ended up being perfect for her circumstances and her publishing route. So definitely want to join me for that conversation next week. I'm glad you listened today. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to talking to you next week.